Hello everyone, I am Youtsen, and welcome back to Nightmare's Edge. Also, happy Halloween everyone. Now, this isn't actually a holiday special. I actually forgot to prepare for that. But this is kind of an unofficial thank you. As of recording this, I did reach 100 subscribers, and that's due to the amazing support that you guys have shown. So thank you everybody who subscribed, who's commented, and liked my videos. It means the world to me. That being said, this still is a bit of a special episode for me, as I've decided I'm going to tell you a personal experience of mine. It happened some time ago. I did write it with as much detail as possible, but understand I'm not a writer. Now before we start, if you have a story of your own you'd like me to read, please check the description for my email. It's going to be listed there. Now, turn down the lights, sit back and relax, and let me tickle those inner fears. This story I have entitled, Shadow in the Cave. To give a bit of backstory, I've always been a fighter, usually never knowing when to back down. I grew up working on a farm. I played football, and I had a black belt in Taekwondo. Oh, and I'm also a member of the 200 Club. Understand that this isn't macho bravado, because I will run if needed. Pride isn't something that's ever prevented me from running. My point is this: it takes a lot to scare me. All of that out of the way, let's get to it. When I was in college, at around age 20, my friends and I used to love exploring caves. We would spend almost every weekend inside these caves. Now, these aren't the commercialized caves that families will visit on vacation. These are the caves that some random person found in some random part of the woods that they only managed to stumble across, and then they would tell others about it. My friends and I would go to 2 or 3 different cave systems every weekend. We would travel all over Tennessee and Georgia to get to these amazing places. We would learn of these spots from Billy Bob or Mary Ann or Earl. We spent a lot of time in these little towns just talking to the locals trying to find these hidden gems. At the time, we weren't really big on drinking, but we did like to find a nice spot in a cave and drink a few beers and tell some good old-fashioned ghost stories. Usually, when beer was involved, we often ended up sleeping overnight and leaving early in the next morning. On this occasion, we returned to a cave that we had been to a good number of times. It was a very large system. We would return to the cave several times a year since we learned of it. As many times as we had been there, we were far from exploring the entire system. So we would return from time to time to explore more of the cave. We frequented the cave often enough that we had some sleeping bags there. Now when I say this cave was huge, I mean it was huge. After dozens of visits, we probably only explored about 5 miles of this cave, and there were still 2 other shafts left to explore. But this trip would prove to be my last trip into a cave ever. Okay, so I changed the name of my friends to keep them anonymous, but let's go ahead and get to the heart of the story. The entrance to the cave would easily be missed if you didn't have a guide the first couple of times. Even with the most detailed instructions, it would be almost impossible to locate. The mouth of the cave was no more than 2 feet wide and was hidden by several trees. These trees appeared to have been planted there to keep the entrance hidden. I do not think this is the case, however, one never knows. That weekend it was 4 of us: Drew, Alan, Selena, and myself. We had packed our backpacks, making sure to have extra batteries, water, snacks, and a change of socks if needed. Once we arrived, we grabbed our gear and headed out on the 30-minute hike to the cave entrance. After reaching the mouth of the cave, we relaxed a few minutes before going in. Once inside, we set out to explore the parts of the cave that we hadn't been to yet. It was, according to stories, the largest of the passages, so we were very excited to see just how big it was. We decided that we were going to stay overnight on this trip so we could explore as much as possible before we had to return to our normal lives. It took us about an hour to get to the unexplored passage, as there were a number of squeezes, so moving was a bit slow. We finally arrived. My watch said it was about 4 p.m. at this point, so I felt we had a good bit of exploring ahead of us before we settled in for the night. We had a great time. So many beautiful sights, so many gorgeous formations, and so many little corners to explore. We spent a good 6 or 7 hours just trying to take it all in. Of course, we took the best pictures we could so that we could show them off to those that weren't able to make it with us on this trip. After our time exploring, we decided we were going to start heading back and just set up camp near our usual spot, which was closer to the entrance of the cave. We got our sleeping bags rolled out and set up a small lamp that illuminated just enough so that we could see the others. We plopped down on our sleeping bags and popped open some cold beers and started telling ghost stories as usual. After a couple hours, we turned in. I was laying there just thinking about how beautiful the cave was when I felt a cold hand on my arm. I looked in that direction and can barely make out Drew's form looking at me. I made an offhand joke about him not being my type, but I saw him shake his head no. I looked harder into the darkness so that I could see his shadowed face, and now I could see that he was scared. I followed his line of sight, and then I saw it as well. About 30 yards away was a shadow so dark that it stood out among the darkness. I have never been so terrified in my life. Something in my being told me this was a danger that I had never experienced, and I needed to run. I scrambled for my flashlight, which was all of about 2 seconds, and shined the powerful beam at the exact spot that the shadow was, and nothing. I was on my feet immediately. Alan, Selena, we're leaving now. I started to get my stuff together, and the others got up to do the same. My friends knew that I am not one to panic or be fearful, so when I said we were leaving, they knew it was serious. We got our belongings packed in just a few minutes, and we were about to head out when small rocks started to pelt us. Selena and Alan both started to panic, but I just pushed them on as fast as possible, with Drew behind them and myself in the rear. I kept looking over my shoulder as we went, not knowing what was happening, just knowing that we needed out. Whatever was behind us had no light in this cave and was able to throw rocks at us accurately. I was on the edge of panic, and every instinct in my body was screaming, "Run faster." But in a pitch-black cave, with 3 others stumbling in fear in front of me, that would only make matters much worse. And I had this feeling, this sickening feeling, that if we panicked, whatever was following us would have been that much more dangerous. The only sound in the cave was the footfalls of my group a few feet in front of me, and a single set behind. And suddenly, a second, heavier set, and both were chasing us. Overwhelming fear came over me. I yelled for the others to move faster, and they started running as fast as possible. I watched my friends start to stumble as they tried to run, and realized this is exactly what these things were wanting. They were hunting, playing with their fear-stricken toys. We were about 100 feet from the mouth of the cave, and I knew we weren't going to make it before they caught us. I yelled at Drew to make sure that the others got to safety, and he knew where I was at if I didn't come out. I guess the tone of my voice made him realize there would be no argument, so he pushed them on. It was my time to stand. I had no delusions that I could hold my own, but the others needed a little more time. So I spun around and lifted my flashlight at where the footfalls were coming from, and they stopped immediately. There, about 20 feet from me, were 2 figures that looked like they were just a couple of guys, wearing hoodies pulled over their heads. I could not see their faces. I cannot express how much it terrified me that they still had no light in this cave, and there were 2 of them. They were so fast. I stood there for what felt like an eternity. They didn't move, nor did I. Eventually, though, I started to slowly back away. I had put another 20 to 30 feet between us before they started to stalk forward. I could hear that the others were starting to make their way outside the cave, so now was my time. I spun and started sprinting for the entrance, but I could hear that they were already gaining. I am a 20-year-old man who had played football, halfback actually. I ran track, and I ran sprints every morning. I was fast, but these 2 gained on me like they were trying out for the Olympics. At about 10 feet from the cave entrance, I could feel them. They were so close. I continued my sprint to the entrance and tried to dive through the tight squeeze, but I felt a hand clamp around my right ankle. This hand had stopped my flight forward instantly. I landed hard on the ground, smashing my face against the rock floor. The pain exploded in my face, and I knew my nose was broken. I felt the blood start flowing immediately. I tried to scramble forward, but could not kick out of this iron grip. I was about to turn and fight when I felt hands wrap around my wrist and start pulling, and almost immediately, the grip on my ankle released. Drew and the others pulled me out, and we wasted no time getting up and running back to my vehicle. It was night, and we ran as fast as we could, but with the branches whipping our bodies, tearing our clothes, and slicing our cheeks like tiny razor blades, it was much slower than we had liked. We finally made it to the car and got in. I drove off as fast as I could. Safety was not a concern. I drove for about an hour and then pulled over. There we sat in the car, in silence, for hours, each not wanting to break it for fear of acknowledging that actually happened.
I do not know what was in that cave, but I do know if they chose to do us real harm, there would have been no stopping them. They were just too fast and too strong. And that, my friends, is the last time I ever stepped foot in a cave.
Thanks again for stopping by. I do hope you enjoyed the video. I'd absolutely love to hear from you guys, so if you have any comments, please leave them below. But until next time, remember, just because you couldn't see it, doesn't mean it wasn't watching you.